Good afternoon, everyone. You are live with King Sigma on this March 10th, 2020 Tuesday, another primary day in America. If you're in the states of Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, North Dakota, Washington, or Missouri, you have the right to go out there and vote in a primary. If there's a candidate out there that you want to vote for, write in, or if you're protesting voting. But today is the day when 6 more states vote in the presidential nomination race. It's been a lot going on since I last did a live stream. Hope everyone's doing well and you're keeping your health in order. It looks like this whole coronavirus thing is starting to make somewhat of an impact, at least on the economy, if not on the health of Americans, especially those over 50 years old, those that are the highest at risk of contracting and dying from the coronavirus. But it's definitely had an impact on the economy. I think yesterday, when we had the first Black Monday since 2008, the stock market lost just about 8%. And that was the most that the stock market had lost since 2008. And I think that it shaved, I believe, like $2 trillion or something like that off the global economy yesterday. But at the same time, when they talk about someone losing there's always someone winning. Because remember, in the stock market game, in this corporate industrial complex game, there's always two or more sides to any kind of trade. So yes, it is true that 2.5 billion was lost in one part of it, but guess what? Someone else gained. And those are usually like the short sellers in the stock market. But where I think the coronavirus hits people the hardest in business is the fact that when you have to like shut down like airlines, you have to shut down like the cruise industry. Those are real tangible losses. So it'll be interesting to see where this whole coronavirus thing goes. It looks like it's spreading inward towards the Midwest now. My state got its first case this weekend because it seemed like it was on the coast at first, but now it's working its way towards the Midwest. So we'll see where it goes. It's always hard to say when something like this hits the news cycle, if it's really as serious as they say, if they're just trying to use it for ratings. It's always hard to say in the first week or two. But we'll see where this thing is a month from now. But I know that it's one of those things that's good for ratings. That's for sure. So if you're in general good health and you're under 50, it seems like you're pretty good. Keep your nutrition in order. Get some exercise and things like that, and you should be good. But we'll see in a month where things are with this whole coronavirus quote unquote outbreak. So in the political arena, like I said, we got the primary today. 6 states are voting. If you do feel like voting and you see someone that you like, go ahead and get out there and vote. It's been some interesting progress with the primary, seeing that Joe Biden was left for dead just a month ago. And somehow, he was resurrected. Also, so Man of Tomorrow said that Italy is shut down completely. Yeah, I had heard about that, Man of Tomorrow. If you want to come on, let me know, man. We're going to be getting into a great conversation. But yeah, so I have been watching the whole Democratic primary from the very beginning when Elizabeth Warren, I believe she was the first one to announce that she was running, either her or Bernie Sanders. And we had gotten through the first primaries, the first 3, and Joe Biden was dead in the water, man. I mean, 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place. And out of nowhere, he was saved by the black boomers in South Carolina. And I've had a lot of time to think about that, man. Because in this space, we've talked about a lot of politics over the last couple months. And I thought for sure, okay, so you got conservative blacks saying that they agree to reparations. Then you got the Hotep saying it. So I thought, well, this might be a time when actually black people figure out this electoral process and they figure out that tangibles in exchange for your vote is the only game in town. Boy, was I wrong. Oh, was I wrong looking at the voting data for South Carolina. The black boomers came to the rescue of Joe Biden, who is the father of the 1994 crime bill. He was the Democrat that pushed through the bankruptcy bill that kept so many working class black people stuck with student loans, not being able to use the bankruptcy process to discharge loans. And they made it harder for you to discharge debts in general with that 2005 bankruptcy bill that was obviously pushed by the Republicans and George Bush. But Joe Biden was one of the biggest Democrats to support it. Then there are a whole bunch of things related to like banking that actually discriminated against borrowers that Joe Biden was on. His whole track record is horrendous. And he's definitely to the right of Barack Obama, but being on the wrong side on everything that the right would be for that's actually for the working class. So for example, I'm against unvetted illegal immigration. I'm an American first, take care of American workers first, put all the funding in the Americans, and then bring in vetted immigration. So I'm like a partially closed border kind of person. Whereas Joe Biden, on one hand, doesn't give a shit about the working class black person, but yet he's for open borders and he's for anything that will keep him in power, doing what corporate elites want him to do. So out of nowhere, he reaches out to Jim Clyburn, and Jim Clyburn being like the highest ranking black American in Congress and having a lot of influence, he was able to use the machine of South Carolinian politics to get the victory by a landslide for Joe Biden in South Carolina. And after that, all the other candidates outside of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Tulsi Gabbard dropped out and threw their support behind Joe Biden. You know, guys like Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, and all these type of centrist corporate type of politicians threw their support behind Joe Biden, who is basically, you know, suspected of having like early onsets Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia. And anyone that's watched the debates may come to the same conclusion as well. So I'll leave that to your own individual observation. But definitely Joe Biden has done nothing during the terms of Congress over, I believe he's been in Congress like 40 years. And there's no signature legislation that I can point to that would be something that Black working class people would care about. He was always on the wrong side of history. And that's why someone who I'm not a big fan of, Jesse Jackson, endorsed Bernie Sanders. Now, again, everyone here knows that I'm an independent with a capital I and a libertarian with a lowercase l. But if you find yourself in that working class situation, I mean, if you're going to go with a Democrat, then you might as well go with Bernie Sanders. If you are a working class Black person or someone with a lot of debt, then I just don't know why you would go with Joe Biden, because he's in this no man's land that they call the Democratic moderate, which doesn't even make any sense to me. Because when you look at like a plate of issues, basically that lane is pro-feminism, pro-emasculation, anti-working class, and pro-corporatist and pro-military industrial complex. It's a weird term, moderate Democrat. I don't even know what it means anymore. So if you're, you know, if you're someone that is looking for programs that are going to help working class, then, and you're going to vote this time, you might as well vote for Donald Trump, if you ask me. Hey, salute to you, Big Poke Dog. Appreciate you, man. Because at least he has like a track record of recently of reaching out specifically to Black men. No other president before was willing to pardon Jack Johnson. Donald Trump pardoned Jack Johnson. Donald Trump can add to his resume that no president in American history has put more money into historically Black colleges. He's done that. He's the first president to come along in like 60 years and do any kind of criminal reform. Whatever the motive is, I don't care. But when you talk about tangibles, he's put more working class people and working poor people back into the workforce than any president in the last 30 years. He put more single mothers back into the workforce than any president in like 60 years. And this is someone who doesn't know if he's even going to vote in the fall. I really don't know, you know. I really don't know. It's too early to tell. But all I can say is that if you're going to look at who's doing something for Black men specifically, I could see why someone would say that they would vote for Trump. But why you would vote for a Joe Biden, if you claim to be for working class and for working people and anti-corporatist, then you might as well go with Bernie Sanders. So I don't know, man. It's a very interesting year, man, to be a Black man. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the topic. I just want, you know, I hadn't been on here in about a week, and a lot of things was happening with the politics and with the coronavirus and everything. But we'll see where things go today, because if Bernie Sanders loses Michigan, I think it's pretty much a wrap for him. It's just a very strange thing that Joe Biden was third place, fourth place, fifth place in all these diverse early states. And it ended up being Black boomers that saved Joe Biden, man. Just think about that for a second. With all this talk that we have in this space about millennials, zennials, Gen X, boomers in silence, it would be the boomers in silence that saved Joe Biden. And when, you know, it was interesting looking at some of the exit polls and the interviews and things like that and seeing what they had to say their reasoning was. And basically, the main reason why they had saved Joe Biden, they said because of Barack Obama, because he was Barack Obama's vice president. So that's where we're at. In a year when the American native Black population is about to be erased from the political conversation and economic competition on average, the best thing that the Black boomers could come up with is that he stood by the first biracial president. That was it. No tangibles, no change. You'll actually move in a bad direction. Because think about it, okay. The problem with people like Joe Biden is that, so you'll get no positive, tangible change if you're a Black American on average. But you'll get the influx, and we've talked about before, of 10 million illegal immigrants that the open border leftists want to bring in. So you get all the negatives and none of the positives. You're a Black man. You see what I'm saying? Because Joe Biden and the people that are backing him and those that endorsed him, they are very much strong open borders people. And they've already talked about how they want to, we got 16 million illegal immigrants in America right now that they want to give full citizenship to, right? And they also said that over the next decade, they want to bring in 10 million more. So that's 26 million, which are mostly dominated by Latin Americans from Guatemala and Mexico. They will become citizens at a time when they're already saying that Hispanics are at about 20% of the American population. So you make citizens of the 16 million illegals who cut in front of the line of the 5 million that are on the waiting list that are fully vetted, visas sponsored, family sponsored, people that are more likely to be trusted. I mean, this whole thing is just crazy in 2020. So yeah, I wanted to talk today about the domestication of the male academic, because that all relates to just where we are as far as this whole quote unquote identity politics. Because remember, in our discussion before about the Combahee River Collective, we found out that in 1978 that identity politics was created by Black feminists, and that identity politics only meant strictly a Black female independent politics. That's what it meant. But what's happened is that over the last decade, they've sold the idea, even though the creator came on television and said that, yo, this identity politics thing has nothing to do with Black men, Latinos, none of them other people. It has to do with Black women. But because most people don't do the reading, they are just listening to this, calling it identity politics, but what we would just call the politically correct woke leftists is what I would call them. So there's been a lot of discussion on Black male YouTube over the last week because of a couple articles that have came out against SYSBM and that have come out against Black Manosphere, especially Black Manosphere 2.0. And the brother Obsidian had sent out some emails, and because he is not here, I will not talk specifically about the emails because he puts them on a newsletter, and I did invite him to come on, but unfortunately, he actually did a live stream right when I went live today. So we're literally streaming at the exact same time. But I can just talk a little bit about, just the general outline of what he was talking about. And basically, so this guy, this young academic that is pursuing a PhD in history, he's been attacking the Black male spaces for whatever reasons. And it doesn't matter who he is as an individual. And I try not to get into like personal attacks against individuals, but I try to look at the kind of arguments that they make and the general trends that it might show to the audience about where this thing is going. So I think that what's being proven is that the last 12 years has seen the domestication of the male academic, especially the Black male academic. And we've entered a very, very competitive libertarian marketplace in terms of how knowledge is spread out now. You have to understand the whole structure of education over the last 60 years specifically has been a very monopolized industry, you could say. Because if you look at the last 100 years, the government has played a bigger and bigger role in the quote unquote schooling industry. Because I don't like using the word education, right? Because what I think of education, schooling, and credentialing is not the same thing. An educated person comes from experience. You become educated through a process of self-education. And you can also get education through a university. That is true. But not all people that are educated attend university. You see what I'm saying? But to get schooling and credentialing, you need to complete some kind of program at a university or a college or whatnot, or K through 12. So to get credentials, yes, in the way that America's set up, there's like a monopoly on how degrees are issued, and it's mostly issued by government sanctioned institutions. But that is changing more and more because of just the creative destruction of the internet. And I don't know how many of you read the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov, but he wrote things like I, Robot and that whole I, Robot type series. And one of the famous statements that he made that's very much downplayed by the mainstream is that self-education is, according to him, the only kind of education there is. And what he pointed out, he said that the only function of a school or university is to make self-education easier. And he said that failing to do that, it does nothing. So we can call that the Asimov standard of education. So we can just call it the Asimov standard of education. So the function of a school is to make self-education easier. And failing to do that, it does nothing. Now, so I was thinking about the Asimov rule for education, and then I found myself reading some business news this week. And I came across an interview of Elon Musk. You know, we're in the first quarter of 2020. They're having these different meetings with their shareholders, and people are asking Elon Musk different questions about Tesla Motors. And there were some academics that wanted to ask him about the future of education. And I think that what Elon Musk said about the future of education is very telling for how we in this black male YouTube space have come to a point where now our conversations are becoming an issue for certain academics and for certain politically correct culture warriors, right? So you would think that our little spaces where we might have 25 to 200 people, if you're one of the smaller channels like myself, or some of the brothers that have like larger subscription bases, they're hitting those 500 to 1,000 numbers, but it's still minuscule in my opinion. But for some reason, our conversations are starting to reach higher up people. So Elon Musk was talking to some of these college administrators and academics at a conference called Satellite 2020 yesterday. So here's the article I'm going to read to you guys. It's called Elon Musk Says College is for Fun and Not for Learning, echoing PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel. Now that's interesting. Think about that. Peter Thiel was the guy that started PayPal with him. Now, we know that Elon Musk did earn a Bachelor of Arts from Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, in economics and physics. He was attending Stanford for a PhD program, but he dropped out after the second day. And the reason that Elon Musk dropped out after the second day was because he started a company called Zip2. Many of you probably never heard of Zip2 because it preceded him going into the deal with Peter Thiel and that team with PayPal. But he ended up making 22 million off selling Zip2 eventually. So he had dropped out of Stanford. He was only in his PhD program for 2 days. Now he's considered one of the foremost minds in American business, in science as well, because he has this big project where he's trying to start like a colony on Mars. So he gets off into like a whole bunch of different areas of his interest. But he had said at the Satellite 2020 conference on Monday that you don't need college to learn stuff anymore. And he says it's a similar sentiment expressed by Musk's co-founder at PayPal, Peter Thiel, who almost a decade ago started paying entrepreneurs to leave college and work on a startup instead. So it says in 2011, PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel began paying college kids to drop out of school to develop a startup. Elon Musk, who led the payments company with Thiel before becoming CEO of Tesla and creating SpaceX, has a similar view of higher education. During his keynote at the Satellite 2020 conference in Washington, D.C., an audience member asked Musk about the necessity of college education. He says, "You don't need college to learn stuff. The value is seeing whether somebody can work hard at something." He added that Colleges are basically for fun and to prove you do your chores, but they're not for learning. That's powerful. Listen to what he said again. Colleges are basically for fun and to prove you do your chores, but they're not for learning. It sounds a lot like the front page of the website for the Theo Fellowship Program, which gives anyone 22 or younger the ability to apply for a 2-year, $100,000 grant to build new things instead of sitting in a classroom. College students have to drop out to join. So for anyone out there, for any of my younger brothers out there in the zillennial generation, if you're 22 or younger and you're into like startups and coding and business, there you go. You need to go look into this thing called the Theo Fellowship. He'll give you a $100,000 grant for a 2-year program to help you build your startup if you have a good enough idea. So that's for you Zennials out there. Theo, a vocal supporter of Donald Trump during the 2016 presidential campaign, has blamed Silicon Valley's liberalism on higher education, telling podcaster Dave Rubin in 2018 that one of the downsides of too much education is that you get the most brainwashed. Musk graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, and Theo received his undergraduate and law degrees from Stanford. Did Shakespeare even go to college, Musk asked rhetorically. At Monday's event, probably not. Despite Musk's skepticism, many of the open job listings at SpaceX list a bachelor's degree or higher education as a base requirement. So that's that. Those were some comments that Elon Musk and his co-founder of PayPal had stated on Monday. And this is, you saw the credentials. I mean, come on. Peter Thiel, Stanford law degree. Okay. Elon Musk could have got his PhD from Stanford, but he wanted to go out and make money and actually do real business in the real world. So what we got from those statements is that college is a bunch of annoying homework assignments. Spending time in college is one of the benefits is that you're around your peers that are in your age group for the last time before you go off in the workforce, into the diverse age workforce. And colleges are for fun and partying, but they're not for learning, according to Musk. And he says that degrees from prestigious universities are way overrated. Now, this is coming from one of the richest people in America right now that has built several successful companies, someone that has taken his Tesla Motors company from bankruptcy to actually damn near replacing the American car makers with much less workforce, okay, and less overhead. So that's something to think about. So I kind of wanted to lay the ground for what I was going to discuss in regards to specific situations that are going on in academia that no one's talking about. So before I get to that, let me show some love to the chat. So let me see what's going on with the chat. Man, I appreciate y'all stopping through for your lunch break. Always really enjoy these conversations. So the highest lotus says, chat search how to get rich without getting lucky by Naval Ravikant. I use this to start my own business and it has helped my tribe as well. Salute to you, brother. Because that's where we're going with this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. I really think that a lot of these older academics they have no clue where things are in regards to what you can learn on the internet. You can pretty much learn anything on the internet for free now. There are some things that you need to learn in person, like if you're in medical school, if you're a carpenter, if you're someone that's in the building things, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do on the job training. But when it comes to a lot of the social science stuff, I mean, come on. We're at the point now where I don't even know what the point in. They shouldn't even force a person to do social science at universities anymore, because social science is just reading and research-based writing papers for the most part. So I would think that they would get to the point where 10 years from now, well, we already know that about a quarter to a third of all universities will be closed in 10 years. But I'm betting that a lot of those social science type majors will be eliminated, because what they'll do, instead of doing social science majors, they'll probably just come up with a test that says you take this test or whatever, and you can get this social science degree. Because I can speak to this, because even though I graduated from undergrad 2008, a year ago, I went back to school because through my job, I had received some reimbursement funds that needed to be used. So I had a chance to take a grad school class a year ago And boy, was I disappointed. I walked out of that class saying to myself, they are charging students here $50,000 a year to learn things that you can now learn on your own with less overhead, less expenses, and quicker. There was nothing that I learned in that class at all that I ended up paying $3,000 for one class, but it was obviously my employer paid for it. But the fact is, it was $3,000 that I would have rather put in my pocket to go on a vacation or something that would have been more immersive than that class. And I got a lot out of the class. I did. But one of the things that I noticed is that nothing I learned in the class that I couldn't have learned on my own. There was probably 3 books that we had to study through. They were all law books. And all of the books I could have bought on my own, studied on my own. There was really no engagement between the professor and the students anymore. That's what I noticed that was different from when I graduated from undergrad and going back to take a grad class 10 years later. What I noticed is that there ain't no engagement, man. You know, and I monitored this because at this point I had been engaged in the Black Manosphere 2.0. That's when I came through, was when I was taking that class. And I realized that I got more engagement for the people that I talk to on social media or in the barbershop or in my real life than I do at a university now. And that really did stand out in my mind. But now that this whole attack of the first wave of academics has hit our spaces, now my thoughts are coming back to me. And I actually, as I had told people, I kind of wanted to start my own blog at the end of the year where I can every once in a while drop a story. But because of this situation, I ended up writing my first blog, even though I haven't started a website. So I'm probably going to publish it this week on one of the brothers' blogs that I know. So I'll let you all know on my community tab if I decide to publish it or not. But I've always been a person that believed in journaling because I like to write my thoughts down so that I can refer back to them a year later or 2 years later. So I had already had some thoughts based on what I'd heard other people saying about these academics coming into this space and the kind of claims that they were making against us. So I just started writing down some notes, and eventually this week, Obsidian had sent this newsletter out about an article that he wrote over at the Negro Manosphere in response to the article that the academic at Indiana wrote. And so I definitely think you guys should go read it and provide commentary and feedback on what you think. So I had taken some notes, and I took more of a macro view of the issue between those two and these attacks from this first wave of academics on our spaces. So we'll see if I publish it or not, because I don't want to publish something that I don't feel that will add something to the conversation and be constructive, but we'll see before the end of the week. So anyways, so this is just the first wave, okay? And I was thinking about the fact that these academics have no clue that the status that their degrees bestowed upon them 30 years ago does not remain anymore. I'm really convinced they have no clue. And just reading some of the response to that exchange between Obsidian and the young academic and some other academics that he had included in the newsletter as well, I'm really convinced that a lot of these older academics specifically believe that having a PhD, having a master's degree or MBA is like the crown jewel in 2020. And they're so wrong about this. See, that's why, what's happened is that the internet has opened up learning to everybody now. That actually just only thing that it requires is Wi-Fi and discipline. I'm teaching myself coding right now as we speak over a very slow process, but I'm able to do it without having to pay someone. I mean, the class I took cost me $3,000. Okay. I'm thinking like, I would have liked to take that $3,000 and put it in my bank account, but it had to be used because it was specifically for education related funding through my, my workplace or whatnot. So it had to be used strictly for education. And one of the things that stood out to me is that the book that we read, I'm sitting there like, I could have got this book for $5 on Amazon. And it was funny because the professor, he's a big time attorney, right? And he made us buy his book, of course, but the edition of the book that he used to teach out of for reference, he wanted you to get the latest edition. And that latest edition cost like $300 or $400. So I had to like write him a note saying, you know, this grant that I have to take this class pays for my class. I don't see the point in me having to pay for the newest edition of this book when it only has like one new chapter compared to the last edition. And we worked that out. So he, you know, we set up a deal where he like put a book, the latest version on hold for me at the library. But then I was able to get the old version for like $2 on Amazon. But my point is that university is becoming actually more of an expense than an asset now. It really is. And when you look into some of the articles that are being written out about PhDs, man, you know, even corporate America is telling you. I mean, come on. Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are at the forefront of innovation in Silicon Valley and building companies that compete with the old blue chip companies and taking their market share. So you got to ask yourself, who are you going to believe? The academics sitting up there in their ivory tower, living off of the funds given to them by taxpayers like you and I, and also funds given to them by those business people like a Thiel and Elon Musk. I say follow the money. Why go through the academic when you could just go to the people that are actually paying for their fellowship, paying for their tenure? That's who I want to talk to. So what is happening? The academics are getting pushed out, and the male academic is leading the line and getting pushed out. Now, I want to ask the people in the chat, have any of you heard of Roland Fryer and Roland Sullivan Jr.? Put a 1 in the chat if you've ever heard of those two professors, because I want to talk about them, because that relates to this whole conversation about politically correct culture and the silencing of views. So it looks like no one's heard of them. That's fascinating to me. That tells you how detached the academics are from the working class people. So we got a couple now. So we got Sean Perry, Darkman. So we got 2 out of 7 so far. So let me just see who knows of them. Okay, so it looks like about 75% of people have never heard of Professor Roland Sullivan Jr. and Roland Fryer. So a little bit about them. So Roland Sullivan Jr., he was a law professor at Harvard, and he's also a noted defense attorney. But he made national headlines last year when he was one of the defense attorneys representing Harvey Weinstein, the poster boy for the Me Too movement. He caught a lot of flack and ended up losing his job and his faculty dean position up there at Harvard this year. He got ran out. And the reason was the students were claiming that him representing Weinstein was kind of like a microaggression, right? So it's this thing, you know, the microaggression, which is a real thing. But what has happened is that people have taken microaggression to mean anything now. So it makes it meaningless. So what we have in this age of the politically correct woke culture since 2008 is that anything can be anything. Anyone can believe that they're anything as well. So I can say that I'm a bird even if I can't fly. So the students at Harvard ran one of the few. Now remember, we got to give this thing context. We're talking about a black man who is married to a black woman, both lawyers. So remember, Professor and Dean Roland S. Sullivan Jr. up there at Harvard, he was married, or he's still married to a woman by the name of Stephanie Robinson, a black American woman. And she was a lawyer and a professor as well. Harvard ran both of them up out of Harvard over him representing Weinstein. So that got me to thinking, okay, I already know just from a panel that I did with Dr. Phoenix last year on the disappearing engineer and affirmative action that there aren't a lot of black people, especially not Native Black Americans, earning master's degrees anymore, PhDs, and getting these kind of jobs. So I wanted to know the exact numbers. Come to find out of the 1.5 million faculty currently at degree granting universities, only 3% of them were black males. Now, black men are about 5 to 6% of the US population. But what stood out to me is the comparison piece. When you look at the chart for the number of Black faculty at universities, Asian males were 6% of the current faculty at American universities. Now, why is that unbelievable? Asian males are only 2.5% of the US population, but they nearly outperform their representation on faculties at American universities damn near 300%. Did you see what I said? Asian American males are overrepresented by a factor of 3 at American universities and compared to their numbers in the general populations. Black males, on the other hand, are at half of their representation in public. They're not even at 100% representation at these universities. Even though when you look at the information, it says that most of these universities have non-HBCUs have student bodies that are very non-white. Some of them, some of the Ivy Leagues, I believe, were like almost at 40% non-white. But the Black representation is way lower than it should be, considering the investment that Native Black Americans have made in every sector of this economy. So that's what stood out to me, was how few Black professors there are, especially Black men. But yet I keep reading about these cases in the media of Black men being ran out of universities like Harvard. So basically, just the student body just saying, hey, we feel uncomfortable because Professor Sullivan is representing Harvey Weinstein in this case. It creates a hostile environment. We don't want him here. This is insane, because the main purpose of university is supposed to be the investigation of social phenomena and physical phenomena and solving the problems that phenomena creates in the world. That's supposed to be the whole purpose of a university. The scientific method, investigation, free transmission of knowledge, having to defend your ideas. That's the critical piece of a university. At its foundation, it's supposed to be that it teaches people to receive information, to develop their own take on it, and to learn how to defend their positions. But that's not the case anymore in your 2020 academia, as this politically correct culture, this feminist culture, has overtaken universities. A lot of you may not be aware, maybe some of you are, but in 2020, there are now more women on college campuses than there are men. And now, for the first time in 2019, there are actually more women in law school than men. And that grad school piece to me is more critical, because those are the future politicians of tomorrow. Those are the future senators and governors and policymakers of tomorrow. And more, these women control academia. They control the entry into the policymaking fields. And they're treating the men on those campuses like either as perpetrators of sexual harassment, microaggression, and patriarchal aggression, or they want to castrate those men on campus and turn them into male feminists or eunuchs. And that's what kind of led me to do this upload. But that number that I saw for the Asians overrepresentation is embarrassing, man. So while you got Black men sitting here fighting each other over petty issues, you have no clue how far behind you are getting left. These Asian males are overrepresented by nearly a factor of 3 in the halls of power in academia. And you're paying for that. See, that's what's critical. Taxpayers pay for that. Corporations pay for that. So you have an absolute right to speak on these issues that are going on in academia. Do you want an academia that has free flow of information and free exchange? Or do you want an academia that is a cancel culture where someone is just canceled because they happen to not be a female or they happen to not be living an alternative lifestyle? I mean, the whole idea in law is that everyone has a right to a defense, a criminal defense. Tomorrow I can be accused of a crime. Everyone that's listening today could be accused of a crime tomorrow. All of us. And I guarantee you that you'll wish that you had the best defense attorney that money can buy. Guarantee that you'll hope for that. So in this situation with Harvey Weinstein, he's now been found guilty at the trial court level. So we know what that is now. He has been found guilty no matter what your feelings are. But he had the absolute right to hire Professor Sullivan as his attorney to defend him. And Professor Sullivan had a duty to make the choice if he wanted to defend him or not. He made the choice to do so. He believed that it was his duty to give him the best defense that he could, and he did so. And because of that, a black male law professor and his black wife, who was a law professor, were ran out of Harvard last year. No one's talked about this in these spaces. But that's crazy that something as simple as protecting our constitutional rights and our civil and political rights will get you ran up out of academia in 2020. So that's what happened with Professor Sullivan. So he's out of a job. His name has been completely tarnished. And like we've said before in these spaces, man, the mere accusation of a crime or a microaggression or some kind of sexual harassment allegation is enough to get you ran up out of a lot of these jobs, academia, and just have your name just completely tarnished. I'm not with that. So that led me to another case that related to the same issue. And that was the case of Roland G. Fryer Jr. And I know y'all thinking, damn, I won't be naming my son Roland. If there's one thing I'm not going to do after doing this research, I'm not naming my son Roland. Roland is a bad luck name, especially if you got a son that might be in academia one day. I mean, so the other professor at Harvard's name was Roland too. And he was a young guy. So here we go to our second case. So like I told you, in the first case, you had Dean and Professor Roland S. Sullivan. Both of these cases are from last year. And him and his wife got ran out of there. But then another case that went below the radar that happened at Harvard last year as well, with a black professor that was highly credentialed, award-winning, fully noted in his industry, was a brother named Roland G. Fryer Jr. Now, Roland G. Fryer Jr., what stood out about him is that he was actually one of he was the youngest Black American to ever receive tenure at Harvard. But last year, he found himself caught up in a sexual harassment allegations and was suspended from Harvard for 2 years following like sexual harassment claims and investigation at Harvard. This didn't have anything to do with like police or anything. This is just an in-house investigation where some females that worked with him said that he made unwanted advances and of a conduct of a sexual nature, and that it created a hostile work environment. So again, there's that terminology, a hostile work environment. The same kind of language that was used against Roland Sullivan. So Fryer was an economist. He had created like this economic lab. He did like a lot of research in the areas of like Black America, Black America's economics, their status. Race and economics was kind of his field. But again, up until just last year, he was a darling of the politically correct left. But soon as there was an accusation by a female that he made a quote unquote unwanted advance of a sexual nature, they ran him up out of there. And what was weird is that I was reading some of the testimony from some of the female TAs that worked with him, and there was this Indian Asian woman who was saying that that he didn't do those things. So there was evidence that it wasn't what these females said that it was, because this was actually an Indian woman that worked for him, and she was very hurt and saddened that they tarnished his name. Because understand, he likely will never be able to get that kind of job again, because he's suspended from Harvard without pay and barred from the campus for 2 years. He can't even reapply to come back to Harvard until 2021. And by that time, their student body will probably be only 3/4 of what it is in 2 years. Because again, as I said before, especially women, more and more men are using the internet to educate themselves, and they're trying to not be in those environments. And I've read some papers on that from the universities, where even they're noting that more and more men are choosing not to apply to university, and they're trying to take the deal that people like Peter Thiel are offering. Peter Thiel, he left Silicon Valley, and so did Elon Musk, saying that they can't take the politically correct culture out there. Now imagine if white men are saying that they can't deal with the politically correct culture in Silicon Valley, are saying that, what kind of hostile environment must it be for black men in those environments? And as we see with Harvard, it's very hostile. So they don't want you to be a man anymore. They want to define what a man is. And for the feminist left and their male feminists, being a man in 2020 from their viewpoint means conceding to whatever is the current identity politics sacred cow of the day, right? And it changes every day. So today it'll be, it's like that law that they passed in California last year that's going to be ruled unconstitutional. The one where they said that they have to have a quota system on the corporate boards where half of all women on corporate boards have to be female in California. The Democrats out there just passed that law, not based on merit, just because there's 50% of women in the public population, there needs to be 50% of women on the corporate boards, which is insane. It's unconstitutional, and it's the bad kind of affirmative action. But they actually passed it in California last year. It'll be overturned next year at the Supreme Court. But my point is that just the fact that they think that something like that's a good thing. So we've moved away from judging people by their character. Black men have just been left out of the equation completely. And it's all about this gender, sexuality kind of conversation in regards to where it should be. But when you actually ask yourself, well, what does that have to do with me? How do I benefit from all this? Where's the benefit from the average black common man? There is no benefits. So you're supposed to pay for all of this. It doesn't create better products for the marketplace. It doesn't lead to better goods and services. It doesn't lead to innovation. It doesn't put more happiness in your life, but somehow you black working class men are supposed to pay for all this shit. So let me, the brother Black Hero Strike says, Ron Sullivan was also on NFLer Aaron Hernandez defense team. Aaron was convicted of murder, yet Sullivan was not canceled for defending him. Yeah, I had read about that that case that he worked on, but I think that it was like more than one case with Aaron Hernandez. I think he beat one of the charges or either one of the cases, and then he got found guilty of another case. So you would have to like update me on that one and remind me of what happened. But I think that one of those cases Aaron Hernandez beat, and I think that's the case that Professor Sullivan was actually on. So that's where we are in 2020, a very hostile environment for free thinking and the free exchange of information. And for me, it's like, if you are someone that's trying to protect like free exchange, these kind of things should definitely set off an alarm in your mind. Because I saw it when I took that night class at the law school. I saw it, man. There was no exchange between students in debate at all. It was just sit there, whatever the professor told you, that was it. It was the most boring experience I ever had. And it wasn't like that just 10 years before. 10 years before, the same kind of conversation we have in these spaces is the same kind of conversation I can get on a college campus, but even better because it was more formal, it was more structured, and it was based off research and primary documents. But they've lost that position as being the lead in open exchange now is what I'm trying to get at. I can no longer say that academia leads in open exchange because anything that you say can damn near get you fired, especially if you're a male, man. And it's like, when you look at the case of Roland Fryer, I'm trying to, like, you get in these mixed messages. Some of the women said he didn't do it. Some of the women said he did. And then it was like, well, what did he do? Oh, he said that my shirt looked good today. We're actually going backwards. We're not progressing forward. Soon, you're going to have more and more men dropping out of corporate America, more and more men avoiding any kind of institution that's dominated by feminists, and they're going to just start going to online venues and creating their own companies or just avoiding work altogether. I mean, that's kind of where I see this thing going, man. They said that the brother, Professor Fryer, like, I mean, he really didn't even say anything. Oh, you look good today. That's enough to get you fired in these jobs now, man. Just telling a woman that she looks good at work. And it used to be that like about a quarter of all marriages happened between coworkers up until just the last 3 years. Up until the last 3 years, a quarter of women found their husbands through work. So now you can remove it off the table. So now that number is going to drop to probably zero with the new kind of rules that's being written at these corporations and academia. Because understand, some things are very informal. Just seeing what happened to Roland Fryer and seeing what happened to Professor Sullivan creates like a chill. You know, it creates like a de facto impact on people's minds, because you don't have to go through it yourself to want to avoid it. The best way to learn is by seeing what happened to another person. So you're going to have more Black men saying, I'm not going into academia. So what they're going to do, you're going to see a brain drain again. This is the whole brain drain thing. So you got talented men that would be great academics. And you know that these Black boys need Black male teachers, but more and more Black men are going to be like, why would I go through the risk and all of the things that you got to go through to be in academia when I can take that same energy and go work for one of these startups or create my own startup or go overseas and teach in a country that doesn't mistreat men. Some of these teachers are going to be like, hey, I can go teach English in a country that's patriarchal, that pays me twice as much and that has a lower cost of living. You're going to see that happening. You're going to see men that would have went into the teaching fields and some of these fields that are now female dominant saying, nah, I'm not going into that field. I'm going to go into another field. So I'm actually saying that you're going to have a real hardening gender lines in regards to the kind of fields that men go into over the next decade and women go into the next decade. Mark my words on that. And those industries that are losing talented men just out of fear, because remember, I'm not even talking about the ones that have already gotten axed. I'm talking about the men that are watching the axing and saying, hey, I ain't letting that happen to me. So you're going to see more and more of them avoiding certain kind of industries. You're going to see men getting job interviews, and they're going to go into the interview and they're going to have nothing but women interviewing them. And they're going to say, you know what? I'm not interested. You're going to see that. I know it sounds outrageous, but I'm telling you, that moment is coming, man. Because no one's talking about the secondary and unintended consequences of a lot of this stuff happening to Black men. When they see it, they're like, you know what? They're not good. Why would they treat me better than they treated Roland Sullivan? Why would they treat me better than Roland Fryer? What if those men are more qualified than you? What if those men were more non-threatening than you? And we're going to talk about that non-threatening Black male crap that came out of the 90s and the 80s and the 90s that they created. Because they told you that if you were a non-threatening Black male, everything was going to be sweet and good. But what you'll find out is that, things have changed. Non-threatening enough. Having testicles that have dropped is enough to get you fired and ran out of academia and corporate America now. And those nice kosher government jobs. You see what I'm saying? So let me see what brothers are saying in the chat. Xanatos Clutch says, thinking Black men need to have that same philosophy in going into industries and moving into countries that are less hostile towards us. Both of those things exist despite the woeful message from pro-wax. Yes. Absolutely. Shout out to Get Shrek. He says, I love these live streams, Sigma. Blessed from UK. Man, appreciate your salute. You know, man, when we, in these spaces, when we get feedback from you brothers over in other countries and you tell us that y'all listening to us, it's such a humbling thing for me, man, to believe that we got brothers in different nations that are actually listening to our opinions and thoughts on different issues. It's pretty fascinating, actually. So shout out to you, Get Shrek, man. Appreciate you dropping in. But yeah, going back to what Xanatos was saying, yeah, that has to be the modus operandi for Black men going forward. And that's why these spaces are so valuable, because we can have the conversation. So the attack from the young academic, I think that Obsidian did a great job of handling that attack. We'll see where it goes. I did try to get him on, but like I said, man, he decided to stream right when I streamed and neither one of us knew. We literally sent each other an email at the same time. So if you want to hear his thoughts and get that newsletter, email him, because I'm not going to go into details because that's his private property. But I'll just say that the question about what is the role of the black male academic and his value to you as a working class black man, that has become the question of the day. Does the black common man need these academic surrogates to speak for us? Have they lost the ability to speak for the masses of black men? I think so. I truly, truly think so. I really think that the black male academics have been domesticated. And that's why I call it the domestication of the male academic. And what I mean is that if we look at what it means to be domesticated, we're talking about a process where someone is tamed, kind of like how you tame like a bull or a cow. And you got to keep them as like a pet or a form of tokenism. That's what I'm trying to get at, is that I mean, I hate to say it, and I'm trying to be fair, but the more and more I hear from these male academics as they enter our space, we bring the raw, okay? They are offended by the way that we deliver the same message that they would deliver if they could. So in a way, it's kind of went in reverse, right? So it used to be that the females were the tokens up until the last 10 years. Now, I'm actually making the argument that the black male academic is nothing but a token now. The male academic is becoming a token, and they're running them out of academia. I was reading a story about this white professor. He's a evolutionary psychologist, and he got ran out of his university just last week because he was talking about Darwinism, an actual one of the oldest theories of human evolution. So now it's considered a microaggression to actually even have a conversation about Darwinism now. So I don't even know what the point of these universities is besides like schooling, credentialing, and rubber stamping, like the brother 8-Win Eagle just said, boule people. I think that's all it is, grooming a class to control the masses. But what they've run into is that, again, this internet and the free spreading of knowledge, no one has a monopoly on this, man. And now that so many brothers are starting their own blogs and websites, oh, we're going to have our oasis even when they start to lock these spaces down even more and more. And when they come through with that censorship baton, we will have places that we can go to continue this conversation. And it's funny is that, you know, democracy, it definitely requires information and a minimum educated populace. But I don't really think that these elites wanted democracy. So the brother G Rock says, let me bring up what he's saying, because he's talking about. So G Rock says Dr. Tommy J. Curry got ran out of Texas A&M. See, I didn't even know about that. Now that's fascinating. I wish I would have known about that case, because I didn't know that they ran Dr. Curry out of Texas A&M. Did not know that. And again, like I said, there's so many of these cases that, with you brothers now knowing about Dr. Fryer and attorney Roland Sullivan, I'm quite sure you guys are going to find a whole bunch of cases that have gone under the radar over the last decade of these black male professors being ran out of these institutions. And again, like I said, it's not limited to just the black men. They've been running a lot of these white male professors out of there as well. It's just that it's more impactful when it happens to black men because there's so few of black men. White males' numbers are pretty much representative of their numbers in the populace. They're around 45% of the professors at universities across America. It's the black male who is way underrepresented across these kind of fields, and the Asian male that's substantially overrepresented, even more so than white men and black men. So we got some real questions, and we have to really figure out where you brothers are trying to go with this dialogue as we continue in 2020. Because all that petty shit, I'm not going to be using my space for that, man. Just not. If it's not some constructive that I consider progressive, I'm not joining in on it, man. So people send me emails, well, what do you think about this beef today? I don't care. The real beef has nothing to do with other black men in the space. Those are distractions. The real beef is with How are you black men are going to find your position in this society moving forward over the next decade, the next generation? Or are we going to end up just like the boomers were in South Carolina? Come on. The black boomers in South Carolina got to own the fact that they had to chase down another corporatist Democrat who's not going to do anything for you, your children or grandchildren, and you saved him because he was the vice president to Barack Obama. No discussion of tangibles. So for me, I need tangibles. I need to know how the agenda is going to support me. That's why I'm questioning this whole academia thing. Because it's you men that pay for academia. If you have like major universities in your state that are public universities, you are paying for those universities. And even some of these private universities get scholarships and things like that. And some of them might even qualify for grants. But those federal grants, different kind of state grants, different kind of funding, a lot of that funding comes from you, the taxpayers. So how is it fair to use the funds from men to pay for your universities, but then to actually use those funds to support misandry at the college level? I mean, just seriously, man. And that's where we're at. So when someone says, you shouldn't be talking about those academics, what do you mean? Every American taxpayer has a right to talk about these academics, especially the ones at public universities. We become such a big welfare state country that people have actually forgotten is that they're the ones that fund the federal government. That's how lost so many Americans are in 2020. They actually have forgotten that they fund that federal budget out of their taxes. The government goes to the taxpayer to fund all of their programs, whether it be good or bad, whether it be to the benefit of the taxpayer or not. You're paying for it. Don't let these people fool you. See, we've gotten so used to thinking of the government as something separate from the people. No, the government can't exist without your tax monies. The government can't exist without innovation from businesses that create income streams that they can tax. Without that, they have to use loans to get their monies for the most part. And that's the worst thing they have to do is to get loans, because it puts you under the authority of whoever the creditor is. And we know that they be doing some very shady deals, the U.S. government, with people that may not have the best interest of the American majority in mind. So when they do something, it needs to be means tested, and it needs to be brought before the American public and discussed openly, town hall style, referendum style. But we've become so detached from it that we've forgotten that the government only exists because of us, and it's only funded because of us. That's why I'm for term limits and things like that. These people get so comfortable in their position that they forget about you and I. Then they start looking down on you and telling you, you have no right to talk about this public university. And then you say, well, we pay for it. You weren't supposed to know that. So that's what I mean when I say that I think that the male academics have been domesticated. They've been tamed. They've been told that they have no right to speak. And if they do speak, it's called patriarchy. It's called mansplaining. It's called microaggression. That's where it's gotten to, man. If you're not parroting whatever the leftist talking point is of the day, they will somehow call it a patriarchal thing. So put it like this. We're getting to the point where soon they will call logic patriarchal. I promise you, if things continue down the road they're going right now, because think about it, let's say that Joe Biden became the president in 2020. Remember, it was Joe Biden and Barack Obama and the Democrats that brought in this whole politically correct culture that's been so devastating for the economy. Because when you think about it, this culture that they brought in and starting around 2008 has destroyed academia, it's destroyed Hollywood, corporate America, Silicon Valley, the church, politics, the family, and it's going to destroy us if we don't wake up. Okay? That's what they've introduced over the last 10 to 12 years, man. So we're not that far away from them saying that logic is misogynistic or logic is patriarchal. And guess what they'll say? Well, it was men that created that. Men created logic. I think it's gender discriminatory that men created logic. That's the road we're going down very soon. So for all you that used to look up to your academics, I don't look up to these people anymore because most of them have sold out. They don't know if they want to be entertainers, scholars. I think they're kind of confused now. See, a lot of what used to be called a scholar now is someone that's looking to get like social media cred and get cred going on like these news shows and like, you know, towing the party line or whatnot, because a big check does come with it. But as far as like that pure scholarship, the kind of scholarship that built this civilization, that's becoming more and more rare. And because of like the flattening of discourse now, where you and I can actually speak for ourselves now, they feel threatened. And that's natural. It's natural that those that have been in the ivory tower would feel threatened by the working class men speaking for themselves. Because again, remember, we are considered the unwashed masses. We're considered the unknighted. So for them, they've had a nice run over the course of the last 500 years. But things have changed over the last 20 years. And it's really kicking into hyperdrive over the last 10 years. And it's going to move even faster over the next 10 years. So the brother Black Euro Strike says, he says, currently looking at the 2018 financial report for University of Illinois, the money the school gets from taxpayers is almost 2.5 times that of money received from tuition and fees. Exactly. But yet the same academics will tell you that you have no right to speak. Because even they've forgotten that they work for you. They're no different than a police officer or a dog catcher, really. They're all paid by the taxpayer. So if they have a problem with the taxpayer speaking their mind freely, then they need to go start their own job and their own corporation or their own business and go private. But as long as they're public employees, they're not above critique. Period. But that's kind of what I'm seeing. So for me, I shout out to the brother Rodney Holmes. Appreciate your support, bro. You guys make these conversations possible. And as we've seen with the Roland Fryer and the Roland Sullivan situation, don't nobody name their kids Roland. But what it points to is that you have to have your independent media. You have to have your independent think tanks. That's where we're at now. And you have to have your own independent schools. And that's the critical piece. We're actually at the point now where it's becoming clear that you're going to have to, if you have children, you're going to have to take on that responsibility of raising your children. You're going to have to support the kind of laws that give parents vouchers, which is only fair, that to the extent that the state awards a certain stipend for every child in public schools, for those that take on homeschooling and those that want to create their own charter schools, every state should be giving those families that amount. So let's say every year, on average, it's $30,000 for America. Anything related to school, like having your own private tutor, going in on a charter school with other parents, or just homeschooling, that money should be given back to the people. Simple as that. I've always been pro vouchers because of that. I've always been pro open enrollment and pro vouchers. And it's for this exact reason I'm talking about now. Because like Isaac Asimov said, the only function of a school is to make self-education easier. And failing to do that, it has no value. That's where we're at now. I'm trying to understand, you people in the audience tell me what can't be learned today. I would say 80% of what a person can learn in university can be learned on the internet right now, 80%. And I do agree there are some things that you can't, like you can't learn all the things you need to know about open heart surgery on a computer or talking in a think tank. But most of that stuff at college campus, you can learn now on your own, especially with this interactive model that we have now. I mean, I've been teaching myself some things just looking at YouTube, going to certain YouTube videos, an hour a day, taking notes, and I'm listening to these things and learning myself. But the same colleges are the price is going up every day. So I don't know. You guys got to tell me what the value of this is. Shout out to the brother Matt Blaylock. Appreciate your support, brother, and joining the conversation. But that's where I'm at. I think that on average, your male academics are becoming a domesticated token class on college campuses. That's what I think. So I'll say it again so no one comes back and tries to like mix my words up and scramble my words or straw man me with a paraphrase. I believe that the majority of male academics on today's college campuses in academia are becoming a domesticated token class that can't speak to the real issues that affect working class men, especially working class black men. That's just my belief. So, because you know that someone will take my words and say, he said that all the male academics is domesticated cows. That's what they will say I said, even though I qualified and was very strict in my language. Keith Wisdom says that most black males in pro spaces are feminized or gay. I mean, it's what it looks like. They had basically what you had is like a generation of men since, you know, the sexual contract, since the Combahee River collective statements were released. These have been the women that have raised these young boys. Keep that in mind. So at least since 1978, you're talking about the Gen X generation and the younger boomer women that have raised these boys with that kind of mentality to emasculate them and make them more feminine on purpose. They literally did this on purpose. And it was kind of like a Frankenstein experiment because remember, you know, human beings are very fragile emotionally. So you may think that you're going to get an input like a robot, but it doesn't always happen like that. It's not always predictable what the response will be and how the response will be from the rest of society. So we're seeing that they thought that they were going to take the last two generations of American men and we were all just going to castrate ourselves. When they, outside of them castrating us, they thought, oh, okay, we're going to have them all locked up. But then the internet came and then the backlash against the misandry came at the same time. So that's kind of why you're seeing this progress of these academics coming into this space, because it's reached a point now where they consider our messaging to be dangerous. And also, what could I say? Unfiltered. There you go. That would be the term I use, unfiltered by their filter processing, right? So it used to be that your status, so it was like a fallacious appeal to authority. Well, this person went to Harvard and he has a PhD and he is a professor, so whatever he says is right. But guess what? In logic, that's actually fallacious to say that. On average, in every situation, it's not fallacious, but for the most part, that's fallacious because it's an appeal to authority. There are times when an appeal to authority is valid, but in the age that we're living in, you can't simply just say, well, this person is a professor of A, X, Z, whatever. You actually have to say, okay, so we're talking about such and such topic. Here's my primary documentation. Here's your primary documentation. Let's go at it. That's where we're at now, right? So before, you were in a battle as the common working class man without any weapons against the elites. They had all the advantage. But now I got a sword too. Your sword may be Excalibur, but my shit is made out of steel too, and I can at least defend myself. I can at least defend myself now, and that's revolutionary, and we don't talk about that enough. I talk about it all the time. I keep telling you people, man, this internet thing is one of the most revolutionary things to ever happen to humanity. And there's a lot of people that are sitting up there in the nice air-conditioned ivory tower with that nice taxpayer-paid stipend, and they want to tell you how to think. They want to tell you what to think. And then when they're done doing it, they want to tell you the tone to use when you speak on it. But I say no. We're going to try our best to speak to the argument directly, but I'm not going to be tone controlled and tone police by you emasculated, domesticated academics. So they think they can come to our spaces where we've built our own conversation. Where were they at when Black Manosphere 1.0 came about to defend black men? They weren't nowhere to be found. When Black Manosphere 2.0 built a template for self-funding our conversation, where were all these academics at then? Now that the grass has been cut and the path has been paved, now all of a sudden, the well-manicured hands of the academics are showing up now. Now they're coming to our discussion spaces to police us about what we should say. No, not going to happen. Because you didn't speak for us. You had the platform. Where were all these male academics? Okay. They could have fought back against this third and fourth wave feminism. But the few men that did, they silenced them. The few men that did, they ran them off college campuses. So I got to ask the question. If they were running people like Roland Sullivan off the campus and Roland Fryer off the campus, people like Jordan Peterson off the campus, where were all these other black men and white men to help defend the Jordan Petersons of the world? Where was the unity between the black professors and the white male professors to protect Roland Fryer and Roland Sullivan? Or was it, oh, that's on him. I can't do nothing for him. I still got my job. But guess what? The noose is tightening around your neck too. Because you got to start asking the question. Isn't it natural to think that if the campuses are now female dominated, how long before these females start saying, look, we want more female representation on these campuses because we're the population. Their numbers are going up, up, and up. They're going to start going after all the males on campus saying we don't want any male professors because they're patriarchal. I'm telling you, the time is coming soon. Now, we know that the university is dying and they're going to shrink, but they're going to move fast forward for the next couple of years until it does go off a cliff. But what I'm saying to you is that all these male professors that didn't protect Roland Fryer and Roland Sullivan and Jordan Peterson, y'all day is coming very soon. Y'all day is coming very soon because those same students are going to go to the administration. So it's like, think about how in the 1960s, you remember how all those black students took over college campuses, demanding like that they have like black history studies and that they hire black professors. Guess what? Everything that they talk about now in 2020 is the same, but it's based on gender. It's all about gender and sexual lifestyles. So mark my words, those professors are going to find themselves on the wrong side of the gun with that barrel looking at them. As those women say, why do we only got 30% of female professors or 30% of administrators when we have 70% of female students? And they're going to start removing all of those dudes. All of those male professors who think that they got it good, that they're safe, they're next. So the question becomes, and I will close this with this. So the question becomes, will there be a place for independent-minded discussion that black men, no matter what your political orientation is, whether you be a communist, a free market libertarian, a Republican, or a Democrat, will there be a space for us to come together, have discussions, inquire into the 9 areas of human activity, ask the questions, teach when we can teach, learn from each other when we can or not? And if so, are we going to be free to do so? Or is the domesticated male academic going to come in and shepherd how we're going to have our conversation just to shepherd us back to a position of weakness? Or does the common black man have a right to exist? Does he have a right to his own spaces and his own conversation? Whether, does it really matter how he talks about it if that's his true position? And if he's speaking from a position of intelligence and research, who are you to tell those common black men how to interpret information? And that's where that elitism comes in. See, now that we're talking about primary and secondary documents in these spaces, they realize, well, damn, they're not just saying opinions. They're speaking with data, facts, and information. So now what they do, they try to attack your interpretation saying, well, you interpreted it wrong. What? You and I just read the same thing. That was my interpretation of it. So that's where the elitism comes in. I'm smarter than you because I have ABC degrees or whatever. Nah, man. I've seen too many times someone like a Malcolm X going back and looking at old footage. Salute to you, Wagner. He says, respect great content. Appreciate you coming through, man, and supporting. But I've seen too many examples of the person that has the information has the information. And now we all have access to the same materials. It's just going to be a question of who can digest the information the fastest, who is the most accurate in their interpretation, and who can tell the story the best. That's where we're at. People aren't, when you look on this YouTube and you look at some of these noted popular people that you see on corporate media, guess what? They're not getting the traction that a lot of us everyday people are getting no more. I've seen people in this space on YouTube that have larger followings that are bringing raw information and are asking a question that they can't ask in corporate America. They can't ask in academia, and they can't ask on the stairs of Capitol Hill. And they have bigger followings than those politicians. They have bigger following than those actors and actresses and musicians. And they have bigger following than those pundits on television. And you might not think that that's power, but they know that it is power. The power to influence people. And all I will ever try to do when I do decide to ever come on these streams or partake in a panel, I will hope that I'm transmitting constructive information and I'm asking the right questions. That's all I can promise you. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. And I appreciate you all coming through. Keep asking the right questions. Don't let these academics intimidate you. Don't let them shame you with that classism and that elitism. When you do the work and you put in the time, you be ready to prepare for battle with whoever it is. It could be the president of the United States. It could be a homeless man sleeping on the street. It could be someone from CNN. Just be prepared to present your arguments. And with that said, everyone have a great Tuesday and talk to you all next time. Peace.